You mentioned genuine, and I think one thing reactors probably have to go on the defense about a lot, at least myself specifically, being, an aspiring actor, being a dramatic person. This girl is so overreacting. This is so lame. Like, can people really be this dramatic about frickin' Star Wars? I fully understand that it can be wild to comprehend that someone can be so passionate about a fake world, a fantasy universe, a sci-fi universe. How can you have such deep emotion for something that's not tangible or real necessarily? But I think that's the advice would be to try to look to other things in your life, like sports or video games, where you find yourself getting like irrationally passionate. The more you do it and let go of those hang-ups, the more it comes naturally, and you don't have to be worried, like, should I have responded to that? And,
Yeah.
Oh, that was a big moment. Did I miss that? Did I clock that? Should I say something? Like, that all goes by the wayside, and it just does become more natural. So if you're being real, that's what I try to cling to at the end of the day.
3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reactorverse podcast, brought to you by Passionfruit, where we interview all your favorite creators in the reaction space. I'm joined today by a reactor coming from the Star Wars reaction world. It is LaSalle. Kat, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, of course. I it's been a big year for Star Wars in general, and you're a Star Wars creator, as I just mentioned, and I reached out to you initially to join our Crossing the Streams episode for Star Wars. You couldn't get back to that, unfortunately, right away, but I'm happy to have you here today. We finally made it work.
No, I will own up to it. I'm the worst, and everyone actually who knows my channel, this is no news to them. I'm the worst at responding to my DMs, so that is on me. But thank you so much for the invitation and for still not forsaking me and allowing me to come on your platform and talk all things reactions, regardless. I appreciate it.
It's no problem at all. It's never a dull time to talk about Star Wars. That's what I've learned over the years.
Now especially.
Yeah. But as I mentioned, you're what I refer to as a specialty reactor. So you have a sort of specific interest or genre that you cover, Star Wars being that subject. And to start with that, going back, a long time ago, as it were, what is your history with Star Wars, and how did that come to be, a part of your life?
Ooh, specialty reactor. See, I'm already learning new things about this field. So yeah, I've been a Star Wars fan my entire life, truthfully, and it really got reinvigorated when I met my now husband, but at the time, we had really just started dating right as Force Awakens came back out, and he was admittedly a bigger fan. I'd say we're equal now, but he was a huge Star Wars nerd at the time, still is, probably more so than I was. And so, getting to know him and being able to go see the sequels in theaters really reignited something for me. And then I had the opportunity to partake in a Star Wars fan film, and we kind of were like, let's seize this moment and kind of capitalize on it in a way, which kind of sounds a little bit like, I don't like necessarily the connotation of that word, but we were like, let's seize this momentum and maybe start a YouTube channel, which is something I never ever thought I would do. But we were like, this is a fun time, fun vibes. Let's just see what happens. And so Star Wars content was the kind of foundation of that channel, the focus. Right. And I kind of had held off on doing reactions, frankly, because I don't know, I'd be curious to hear what others have to say about this. But I mean, I still get comments, honestly, that say this is lazy content, and frankly, I had kind of internalized perceptions like that as well. I was like, I want to contribute something more than just watching the media material. And, I was afraid of getting those comments, but I kind of just embraced it after that. It doesn't hurt that reactions perform very well, truthfully. I had been limiting myself to kind of strictly review and commentary content of the new shows and whatnot coming out. But I think it was when The Rise of Skywalker was coming out. My channel was still very small, very young. I didn't know what the frick I was doing. But that initial trailer, which rocked the world, rocked the fandom, I filmed. I think that might be my first reaction, actually, on the channel. I filmed my reaction to that trailer. And we woke up the next morning. We were like, all right, it has 15,000 views. And that was like a huge deal. I don't think we'd ever gotten more than like 5,000 views. So It was exciting. That was like, I think maybe the start of realizing like, oh, this is stuff people like to watch. So sorry, that was a very long-winded answer to Star Wars, but
that kicks us off. Don't worry. But you mentioned finding Star Wars in 2015. It's not uncommon. One of the participants we had on the Crossing the Streams episode, Laura Kelly, who was a Star Wars competitor in the trivia league that I was a part of, the Schmodown. She also found the Star Wars in 2015 with The Force Awakens, and she became one of the most knowledgeable and tenacious like players that we had. Like, you can ask her literally anything about Star Wars lore, and now she can fire it off. Like, yeah, I will. It's clear, from the way you love Star Wars, the way you're obviously everything surrounding you at the moment. It's not just an interest. It's a big passion of yours now. Was there any specific point you sort of crossed that threshold for yourself where like, this is something I really, really care about, beyond just a casual hobby?
Yeah, great point. And honestly, I think you touched on, I feel like I'm in the midst of that, because for the longest time, after I had started my channel and was really just leaning into Star Wars and getting involved with this fandom and connecting with more people in the online community, I had such a resistance to, I was kind of like closeted about it in a way, a closeted Star Wars nerd. Because, that wasn't really ever part of my like high school persona or anything. I don't think anyone would ever look at me and be like, oh, look at Catherine's a huge Star Wars fan at the time necessarily. So when I started my channel kind of freshly, during my college years, I was still like, if anyone ever in my real life ever had found my channel, I would have been like freaked out, like scared, like, oh my God, please erase that from your memory, I kind of like hid it from people in my real life because I was still like, I don't know, toying with the like, this is something I really care about and want to make content about, but I'm, it's still like, it was like a fledgling thing. So I feel like I'm finally just now, I've had my channel since, I can't do mental math, but it's been several years, but it's taken me, I feel like I'm in that phase you're describing just now, finally forsaking all of those self-doubts, or like, God forbid, still clinging to like, well, what will people from high school think if they learn I'm a huge nerd? It's like, frick that, I'm pushing 30. They don't care. They don't care about me anymore. And so, I'm finally shedding that and really like leaning into it and realizing like, if I want, my passion has grown and I want my channel and my platform to reflect that, especially making content, and with YouTube in particular, it's kind of paired with a similar mind space of finally really treating YouTube as not just recreational. It was really kind of just like a hobby for me when I first started, and I was closeted, as I said, about that too. Like, I was very much like nervous if people knew I had a channel, or was like too hesitant to like ever call myself a YouTuber. Right. But I think it's coinciding. There's like a parallel of like, I'm finally not afraid. I'm getting over myself and all those stupid insecurities and just accepting it and owning it and being like, frick yeah, I'm a YouTuber. I have a Star Wars themed channel. And in turn, my, passion, I'm just like, I'm allowing that to really just drive as well. And it's kind of coinciding with accepting this identity as a YouTuber or content creator, and allowing then, the gloves are off, the mask is off. And so allowing my Star Wars passion to really infiltrate, my real world ambitions and stuff like that, not just a hobby anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's a big part of it is like sometimes these platforms motivate people to find themselves in a way that they didn't expect. Like you mentioned, like just the reaction sort of stigma behind it. That was a big thing in the space for several years when it started in the early 2010s. There was like this idea that it's like easy content, slow hanging fruit, so on. But as it's grown, I think that stigma has sort of died down a little bit. Like for the most part, I think everyone understands the sort of work that goes into it, also the genuine passion that comes from it for a lot of people. And the space itself, were you familiar with the reaction space, not just in terms of like the concept, but like in terms of like the sort of landscape of it, of people or like channels? Were there any sort of channels that you looked to when you started getting into that type of programming?
Oh, good question. I think I don't think when I started doing reactions that I knew the full extent of this world, and that people's channels, I had, as I said, I internalized that too. You said it perfectly, that stigma of this is lazy, this is easy content. But as I saw channels who were fully dedicated to that, and that was just their thing, and they had this huge portfolio of reaction content. I think one creator, oh my god, what is it, Alex Hefner, my husband and I love his content, and I think we watch so many other I wish I could put names to faces and channels, but I think when I started to shed my internalized, perceptions about the laziness of it is during when it's like hype times. If a trailer drops or a movie drops or an episode drops, I think it's trailers specifically that my husband and I love to watch and just binge those. We'll just watch every single one that shows up on our YouTube homepage. But in terms of like full-fledged movie reactions or episodes and stuff like that, Alex Hefner is it's funny, he's actually a music reactor as well. He covers like the full reaction space. And he is like one of our favorites to watch, especially because he's actually just now delving into Star Wars. But his channel, him in particular, like he had so much more to it. We watch it for him and like his personality, what he is bringing to it, what he contributes to it, which I've tried to not copy per se, but emulate, because we value his insights, and he makes it fun, and you really feel like you're watching something for the first time all over again with his content. So he's someone we go back to just repeatedly. We really enjoy his stuff, but there's of course so many others in the Star Wars realm. Kyle Katarn, I think, is a huge name. I think we all probably have watched his reactions at this point. There's definitely, admittedly, I'm still, I feel like I've had this mental blockage of like, I've been so reluctant to embrace and accept the title as a reactor and whatnot that I had that mental block, and it kind of prevented me from seeking out that content. But as I'm shedding all of that and realizing like there's so much value that, screw the haters. They don't, as you said, I think anyone can look at it and think it's easy, but there is more that people put into it behind the scenes that I think gets overlooked. So as I'm shedding all of those internal hangups about it, I'm branching out more into actually wanting to learn from other reactors too. Again, not to copy, but to see how they approach it and how they frame the material and how they approach it with their commentary and analysis. Because I'm admittedly still trying to strike that balance between over commentating, taking away from the material versus adding my own. I'm sure you've heard this from, many different people, but it's definitely a balance, and you want to find your own voice. And in the process, I feel like it's been helpful to watch others and see how they approach it and what I respond to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're right. The balance is definitely something you learn over time. When people start out, it's hard to, I think the most common answer I've heard is people have to find a way to evoke their sort of internalized monologue, to be able to put that out there, to make sure it's visualized, vocalized, and so that way it's not just something that just watching a screen for half an hour in silence, even though they're very excited about it. That's the natural tendency that they might have. And yeah, Alex is great. I've loved his stuff for a while too. Like I love all his horror films that he's been doing lately. It's been very fun to watch him. And Kyle, you mentioned Kyle too. Yeah, he's a really good friend of mine. I do all his edits for his Star Wars stuff, and
no way, so cool.
Yeah,
respect.
I've been editing his videos since Mando season 2, and so like I've had a really great working relationship with him for the past few years. So it's been really fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, power to you. I've been enjoying your content then as well. That's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, so for yourself, learning that, that's part of the journey, is learning all those things. Were there any significant technical obstacles for you in terms of just like recording, lighting, editing, stuff like that, on top of the on camera learning curve of just being engaged with content?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm still going through it, because exactly what you had said, that's how my reactions started out, because I've since learned that there's so much more to it beyond people aren't clicking because they just want to watch somebody else stare at the screen for 30 minutes or whatever. They're clicking because they want to see what your genuine thoughts to it are. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of like the editing, that was another hang up as well, that I was so reluctant to fully embrace and continue the momentum of creating reaction content, because I was like, how much do I show? How much can I get away? I'm sure you as an editor, I'm preaching to the choir here. There is, of course, that nature of you're using somebody else's IP, other content. So how much can you get away with showing? Where do you toe the line of what's too much? Mm-hmm. So my first reactions, I used to like not edit those at all. Granted, I was doing trailers, which I think are a little easier with the copyright because they're much shorter content. So when I finally started diving into TV episodic reactions, oh my god, I'm like cringing at what I used to do. I used to really not edit them much at all, and to try to dodge the copyright of it all, I would just take screenshots of I cannot believe I used to do this. I would take screenshots of the episodes. This was hours. It made my life so much harder, because then I would try to literally, it would be like a stop motion thing. And I just assumed and projected like, all right, I'm sure people will understand, like, if I have the audio going and if they watch the episode themselves, they'll be able to know what I'm watching at the moment. They'll get the picture. And I used to get so many comments like, your footage is frozen. Your video is broken. And it's like, no. So it was just a huge learning curve of finally then embracing. It's like, all right, I can actually show the reference footage that I am watching. It's tethering that line of really navigating. How can I manipulate it? How can I, then cut to my commentary? So it's been a learning curve of trying out different styles. For example, I think with Kenobi, I was like, these whole episodes are so good. I don't want to cut any of my reaction out. So I would literally just like put a timer on the screen and show the poster and maybe have some of the audio playing, and I would just have the whole episode. I wouldn't do any cuts. And then I would get comments like, thank you for not cutting away, etc. Like, we love to see your full reaction. So it's like, no matter what you do, whether it's highly edited or it's unfiltered, totally raw reaction, people respond to different things. So I grappled for a while with what people, that feedback I was getting, if people wanted to see the full reaction, and then my own struggle of editing to like want to have my own touch on it as well, and be respectful and not show the full material. So that's, I'm still in that learning curve of, finding that balance and not getting, the struggle. What is it Kyle always says in he's like, thank you for getting this through the
Disney blockade.
The Disney blockade. Yes. It's like, that's so true. But he's someone I looked to be like, he's a totally respectful fan, like super admirable person, a voice in this community. And he's out here doing these reactions in a way that's not like you're just showing the material again. That was just my own hang up for so long. But I honestly looked to him as like he's doing this in a totally respectful way. And I don't see this as lazy content at all, and he has, of course, so much knowledge that he adds to it and whatnot, and just his personality. So he was like a really big source of inspo for me to be like, all right, I need to stop just taking frame for frame screenshots and making my life the worst.
Right.
So editing has gotten better since I finally got over that fear.
Yeah, that's a big part of it too. Yeah, I mean, from my stance is like helping him with that, because like before that, he'll tell you if you were to talk to him, like he was having an issue getting anything up for a long time. Like every video he was trying to edit with was getting struck down, blocked, copyright claimed. So he like turned to me by recommendation of someone else, and I happened to help him out with a couple edits, and it worked out really well. And so we've been together ever since. It's the rest is history.
Nice.
And for you, you mentioned before you were in the Vader fan film, and so acting is a career goal of yours. Did it feel naturally comfortable at all for you to be in front of the camera doing this, even though it's a different type of content? Were you able to? Did you find those sort of skills transferable from like traditional acting to being this?
Great question. Admittedly, I thought I was way more comfortable with it at the time when I first started my channel than I actually was. Because I was like, I feel like I can do this. I got a good hang on this. This is acting. This is what I want to do. And then when I look back on my older videos, I was so not. I did not have the camera presence. You can tell I'm also like, before I even got a microphone or anything fully functioning, like I was like, really talking from my diaphragm, like projecting. Like I can't even physically watch my old videos anymore because I'm like, why is she screaming? Why is she talking at like the top of her lungs? Like, and I just feel like I'm so not. I thought I was confident, but whenever I watch my old content, which I can't even do anymore, I'm like, she doesn't know what the frick she's doing. So I guess it is a totally different beast, because you really are just alone in your room talking to your camera. But I think as my platform grew and I became more familiar with my current audience, my OGs, people who've been following me, thank God they didn't abandon me after like my old content. I think as you get more acquainted with your own audience and your own voice, it starts to finally feel like when I do set up my camera now, I don't have to feel that sense of weirdness that it's just you alone in your room, because I feel the presence of them there. If that makes sense, that kind of sounds a little quack, but it's like the more familiar you get with your audience, and as it grows and you grow with them, that's that relationship that you have with them. I feel like it then lends itself more to the comfort of filming, but that translates to my reactions as well. I used to not really even say anything or comment anything because I didn't know, like, what do people want me to say, right, with my reactions. And so I found the more that I explore my own commentary, that's another element that I've gotten more confident with my own. Frankly, before I started doing reactions, I feel like I didn't have the best comprehension or analysis when it came to films. Like as a aspiring actor, somebody who loves, this industry, and I love watching films and television, I used to not necessarily be able to vocalize what's good, what's bad, what I'm drawn to, the elements of filmmaking or, episodic television that I thought were strong. I used to just watch a movie and be like, I liked it. And then if somebody would tell me, are you kidding? That was awful. I'd have to be like, well, please tell me exactly, like, why? Like, what are the elements of this, that I'm missing? So I feel like that as well, that was like a learning curve of then being able to, like, all right, not only get over, I can't just sit here and look at the screen. I got to share something, but I don't even fully trust my own analysis. Like, what if people judge me? What if I say the wrong thing? It's like, nobody cares about that because they're watching for just a different point of view. So that as well, I think for me, it was all about like a confidence thing of like getting comfortable on camera, and then getting comfortable and not afraid to share what I'm actually thinking, regardless of whether someone thinks I'm stupid or not for my analysis, or if I misinterpret the material or something like that.
Right. Yeah. The genuine interaction, I think, is what people come for. I think even if it's different from what they might, expect or want to hear, I think as long as it feels genuine, I think people respond to that, and I think you do that very well with how you interact with the material. And for Star Wars specifically, it's such I think a natural thing for people to interact with because it's it's something that they're either grow up with or they jump into this and they're very passionate about. You came into the space in a very unique time in 2019 when the sequel trilogy was closing out, and Disney Plus was about to launch and launch their sort of new era of TV content, right before everything sort of shifted. What was your headspace at that time when you were trying to kickstart the channel and there was such a sort of transitional shift going on in the franchise?
Ooh. That's a really good point. I guess I didn't even clock that in my own journey of that. It kind of really was like the revival of Star Wars at that time. And I think my headspace was, I guess if anything, it was kind of like, good thing I'm doing this now. And it was also kind of around the tail end, 2019. Yeah, that's when I wrapped up college. So I was finally going to have some more free time on my hands too, right as you... That's totally right. It was shortly after that Disney Plus launched and we got The Mandalorian. So
right.
It really was kind of like the dawn of a new age, and we were on the cusp of all right, it's about to go down. We're going to be getting more content than we have, of course, pre-sequel trilogy when it was dormant, in the Star Wars fandom. So I think it was kind of again, I don't like to use the word capitalize because that kind of sounds like mischievous, ill intent. You're just trying to, profit off of, the momentum at hand. But I think at the time my channel still was barely monetizable. So I think it was just genuine excitement. Now is the best possible time to be getting in on this. I wonder if I'm even too late because, there'd already, of course, been a huge Star Wars channels, already on this platform. But I feel like that was really a starting point almost for a lot of people. I feel like if you were to look at Star Wars channels then versus now, there's just been so much growth of Star Wars content creators and that content in general. So totally. I think that was kind of our headspace at the time. Let's take this seriously and put pedal to the metal and see what happens. Admittedly, at that time, it still was very recreational for me, and I didn't know how full pedal to the metal I was going to take it, but it certainly didn't hurt that there was all this content that we were on the cusp of. So that was phew, because admittedly, I'm sure you've heard it and feel it too. When there is no Star Wars content and it is dormant between series or whatnot, it's so oh my God, what do I talk about? What do I do?
Yeah. Well, and that was the tricky part of, starting in 2019 with The Mandalorian. It's such a big, launch for the brand, for yourself, for other channels as well. And then the following years when the pandemic hits and that, really torpedoes a lot of plans that some people had. It also gave life to some other things as well. There was a huge reaction boom in the pandemic. So many channels sprung up because people were just stuck at home and they're just I have nothing to do. I'm going to try reactions and just sharing some stuff because I want to connect with people and, share some thoughts. And there are still huge channels there around today that have, really flourished because of it, because of the time that they had to do that. And for existing channels that came into it and then went through the pandemic, like yourself, you're right. It was a struggle to kind of fill in the void there because studios had to pivot and they couldn't put out the amount of material that they were sort of initially planning. And you filled that sort of gap with you were doing fan edit reactions for a while. And that was a big part of the channel. But even you were sort of struggling to kind of balance that out because it was a lot to keep up with. Do you recall what that time was like, trying to just be creative with the channel and being sort of fulfilled with it while you were trying to deal with that first year of the pandemic?
Yeah. The history of my channel, I feel better than I do. I'm oh, wait, you're right. That really was how I kind of started doing reactions. It was those fan edits. Yeah, that was an interesting time, but I feel for me, I had freshly graduated college, luckily right before that all ensued in 2020. So I had the spare time on my hands and the energy to start leading into my community. I think that's where I really focused my energy, I guess. It's like, all right, we're not getting fresh content. What should I be talking about? And you know, running out of ideas pretty rapidly, especially as a fledgling creator. I was like, I barely even have 10 videos on my channel now. It's like, what do I do to try to get this to grow? But yes, it was very much leaning into what my little community there had been requesting, and it was a lot of those fan edits. So I think that's kind of where I leaned into, like, whatever they want to see, I'll take it. You know, that they're more educated than I am right now, and that's a whole separate corner of YouTube as well, the editing community.
Right.
And that was something that I still, you know, I edit my own videos, but that's about it. Like, I still use iMovie. I don't fully even know what I'm doing half the time. So I have huge respect for people who do that professionally, that craft. And so I feel like my genuine just awe and like being so massively impressed by those content creators lent itself well to those reactions. And then I would just get more requests, luckily. So I feel like I really just leaned into my community. You know, you make a really good point. Like, it was dormant. So at the time, I think that's really when a lot of my core peeps on my channel like started joining the community, and we were growing, and I was trying to just do live streams to connect with them more often. I feel like because we were all in the same boat, and I was still, you know, I still like to hold on to the ideals that I still have a connection with my community, but admittedly, I can't deny it was a different vibe when it was, you know, I had less than like 10K subscribers. You know, you can be so much more involved. It feels like you know people more like on an individual level, which I still do in my streams and whatnot still, but something about that vibe, you know, it's like we were starting that journey together, and so that's really what I clung to during that time, and just feeding off of them, like, just tell me what to do, guys. Just tell me what to watch. Tell me what to react to.
Yeah, that early run can feel very nostalgic. You know, it's a double-edged sword. You know, it's bittersweet to have, you know, the success that you have, but then look back and be like, those were the days, you know, when things were simpler and like easier to sort of manage.
Yes, exactly.
And a big part of that, I think, is you started your full reactions with Obi-Wan. You know, we got, you know, Mando season 2, Boba Fett, Vision, so on. But you were sticking to reviews for a while. Obi-Wan was the series that you started dove into, like the full episode reactions for the whole series, and that kicked off in a pretty unique way because your trailer reaction to that was picked up by Howard Stern, who talked about it on his show.
This woman is Catherine LaSalle. She had like a whole nervous breakdown when she watched the trailer for the Obi-Wan Kenobi
He's
series.
not wrong.
And can you imagine when she actually sees the real show? She probably sets herself on fire. She probably goes berserk.
Yeah, how do you get through a whole
You're
show?
not wrong.
Without dying?
That's so freaking true.
And that was its own ordeal. Could you tell us what that experience was like? I guess, you know, hearing that had happened, and then like having the choice to sit down and listen to it on camera for us to see.
Yeah. No, that's when I really, because it was also people from my real life. It was literally my like hairdresser who messaged me about that to alert me to it. If it hadn't been for her, I might not have. Well, no, I probably would have known, because then his followers were like flocking to my channel in the comments section.
Right.
But that was really that was kind of the true breakthrough of like, all right, people in my real life are going to know about my channel now, and I have to like own up to it. And also I'm getting roasted by like Howard Stern, but you know, I think it helps that he has that reputation, and I had been aware of his content, you know, in the past, so I knew what to expect going into that. But you know, it was interesting because, you know, you mentioned genuine, and I think one thing reactors probably have to go on the defense about a lot, at least myself specifically, being you know, an aspiring actor, being a dramatic person. I never fake any of my reactions because I've allowed myself, finally, like, I've gotten over that fear and that self like awareness and lack of confidence perhaps, and just I'm totally comfortable now that I let go, and I forget sometimes that like my camera's even rolling, you know. So it was that kind of that was the catalyst, I feel like, you know, because I received a lot of, you know, comments of listeners from him saying like, this girl is so overreacting, this is so lame, like, can people really be this dramatic about frickin' Star Wars? But, you know, I found myself not I think I that was probably a breakthrough because I didn't internalize that and think like, oh my God, I'm getting publicly ridiculed. Like, I was like, let me just face this and own up to it and be like, you can say whatever you want if I'm overreacting. But Kenobi was the one I was like, this is a life-altering event if you are a Star Wars fan. So that's where I kind of just owned up to, you know, my true fandom of like, I'm not gonna really hide this, at least on camera on my channel here. I'm gonna own it, and those who resonate with it will be the ones who I truly, you know, who value the content and keep coming back. And for Kenobi, I was like, I'm not gonna hide it for this freaking show, y'all. Like, this is the one time, like, no, I guess I didn't realize this when I started. Again, I'm learning from you about the history, the trajectory of my channel patterns. But I was like, gloves are off. I want to freaking capture this to be able to relive this. Like, you know, that was an event for the fandom. So,
absolutely. I mean, I really appreciated the way you approached it. Like you said, it's something, you know, uncommon, you know, from the reaction space for people to be accused of overreacting, faking reactions, and like sure, as I've seen, there might be, you know, a small percentage of people who do sort of buy into that nature of it, but I think it's easy to tell when it's coming from a genuine space. And like for you and the videos that you had up at that time and the trailer reaction for Obi-Wan, it was very genuine, and I can easily see that. I think anyone who sort of understands the space can tell, and it was really, I think, you know, impressive that the way you handled it was to face it head on and to take that, you know, assessment and just like sort of embrace it as, like, you know, your shield, as, you know, Tyrion would say in Game of Thrones, that, you know, sort of wears as a shield of armor. What would be the best insight that you think you could provide to anyone who might, you know, question the authenticity of someone's genuine reaction just because it's something they care so much about?
Oh, that's really good. To somebody who might question one's authenticity, I almost had to just draw the mental boundary for myself of accepting some people will never, some people always deny. They might never be able to believe that you could be so passionate about something. But that's why, you know, with the Howard Stern response, I tried to equate it to, you know, I've seen my husband in particular, like sports fans, men in particular, getting equally passionate, throwing, or even video game fans, like, you know, we've all seen the videos of people throwing their controllers at their TV or whatnot. You know, it's like, even if you can't fully grasp someone being so passionate about a fictional universe, like, I know how crazy that does sound. Like, I think that's why I was so able to be receptive to the Howard Stern critique or whatever, getting roasted by him, because I fully understand that it can be wild to comprehend that someone can be so passionate about a fake world, a fantasy universe, a sci-fi universe. You know, how can you have such deep emotion for something that's not tangible or real necessarily? But I think that's the advice would be to try to look to other things in your life, like sports or video games, where you find yourself getting like irrationally passionate or whatnot. So yeah. One thing I also always would have to tell myself is whenever people would comment and accuse me of the fake reactions or the overreaction, it's like, you wouldn't be watching this. Because admittedly, yes, I've said this on my channel and I'll own up to it. If I'm watching something by myself for non-reaction purposes, I'm not watching it the same way I do when I am filming my reaction. I sit there more in peace, you know, more calmly. I'll be the first to admit that. It's like there is an element of, you know, showmanship there, because yes, when I'm watching something on my own without my camera rolling, it's going to be a little bit different than when I know people are watching to see how I actually feel. So it's really getting in tune with expressing that in a way that doesn't toe the line between distracting from the material, but still being true to yourself. And I just found that was like, the more you do it and let go of those hangups, the more it comes naturally, and you don't have to be worried, like, should I have responded to that? And, oh, that was a big moment. Did I miss that? Did I clock that? Should I say something? Like, that all goes by the wayside, and it just does become more natural. So if you know you're being real, that's what I try to cling to at the end of the day.
Right. Totally. It makes sense. Like, the equivalency you brought up, for sports games, it's the same thing. I feel, when you watch a sports game at home, you can get really excited in a certain way. But if you watch it in person, it's a much different experience to watch a sports game in person. It really brings something out of you. I think it's similar for everyone who does this consistently. To be on camera, it does bring something else out of you, especially when you say, like, you sort of start to visualize the camera as someone in the room with you. Just doing that, if you're watching anything by yourself, it is different. If you're watching it in a room with a friend or a family member, that's different too, because you feel the necessity to sort of engage with them the same way you're engaging with the material. So it's a three-way sort of point there. So yeah, so for anyone who sort of, gets into this space, it's an evolution of yourself, just to be able to understand, like, oh, like there's something is going to be evoked out of me, so to speak, when I'm doing this for the sake of other people, but also for the sake of just engaging with the content in a genuine way.
Yes, that's so true. It amplifies it when you're amongst others, and that's how it does feel at this point. In my YouTube career, I like, it's, yes, as your channel grows and you see that number go up, it starts to feel like, how well does this audience know me compared to when I only had 10K subscribers, but I still do try to cling to that familiarity that helps to drive it. It's like, yes, I'm just talking to my camera, but I really feel them through that. And there's that community there. So it's like, and you always know, like, your OGs will support you no matter what, and they believe where your true heart is. So yes, while reaction is definitely, admittedly, I have branched out a little bit to try some other fandoms, other franchises such as Marvel, and you start to welcome new people to your channel who don't know you or where your heart is or your true nature and whatnot. So that's really been a good tether for me to just stick to, if I do branch out for my content, or, no matter what, no matter how wild my reaction might be or how lackluster maybe some of my reactions are, my true audience, my true core OG peeps will always, it just helps to keep you grounded, knowing, like, who you're really doing this for. Right. Like, that's who it is. That's who I think about when I press play. So
makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned branching into other territories, for the channel. You, at the same time, after that, you were able to react to House of the Dragon, Rings of Power, and Andor all at the same time. So it was a big run in that era, trying to get all three of those things at the same time. I remember that sort of era, and for me specifically, also doing edits for lots of people.
It was wild.
Overnight, yeah.
Burnt out.
Yeah. Were you hesitant at all to cover other material besides Star Wars at that time, since it had been such a staple of the channel for a while? Yeah,
especially because I feel most confident within the Star Wars fandom, and I have a hold of, where we stand, what the kind of tensions are within the fandom, our quirks, what makes us Star Wars fans, versus I was delving into two different franchises, Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, that were founded on book source material, that then translated into media, which I think luckily for Star Wars, that's not the case, because you're not battling then those purists who are calling you out like, you've clearly never read XYZ. We have our own different things to navigate as a fandom, and your level of dedication and whatnot, versus I was so nervous because I'd never really interacted with or navigated the online Lord of the Rings fans who, speaking of having been dormant for a while, they were definitely like, that franchise had been a hot minute since the Hobbit films, since they'd gotten some material. Same with Game of Thrones. I think that was I definitely was nervous because I didn't have a hold of where do these folks stand, how do they feel about this material, how do I navigate. I fully know how to defense now from certain elements of the Star Wars fandom, because you learn to navigate it and stick to what you like and gravitate towards people who share in that. So going in pretty much unaware, I was kind of winging it, felt like it was, jumping into open waters without a life raft, not knowing what to do. So, but that era was so interesting on like YouTube and just in fandom culture in general, because I got to learn the different quirks of each fandom. And so it made me realize like Star Wars fans, we we got to give ourselves a break because I'm over here with the Lord of the Rings fans and they're tearing each other apart. And so it was like, and I thought Star Wars fans had a bad rap. So it was interesting to like see other fandoms in the works.
Right. You're not wrong. Yeah. The those two shows specifically were a great crash course to get into that type of stuff because yes, the Lord of the Rings thing has a element of purism, as you said, from the movies now to Rings of Power and what that sort of difference was. And then House of the Dragon was coming off of like the Game of Thrones fandom that was really burnt out from the Game of Thrones finale. So it had its own sort of internal bias it was trying to get over. And it's tough, you know, and to sort of navigate all those things at the same time that carried you over into you know, elements of the channel like The Last of Us as well and different things you were trying out. Eventually you got to Ahsoka. However, that was stalled a little bit because you started to pause for the SAG-AFTRA strike during that time in that year. And you, like we've mentioned before, you're an aspiring actress. What was the thought process behind choosing to stand in solidarity with them at that time and to pause your content for the sake of, you know, supporting the strike?
Yeah, I know it sounds, because I did receive a lot of like, thank you for being in solidarity, you know, a lot of great assurance from people who were really receptive and understanding and kind of praising that decision. And I felt like I didn't deserve that because, for lack of a better way to put it, I almost had no choice, you know, which I don't like to phrase it as that, like, well, I was forced to. That was a learning experience for me as well, because I knew for acting, obviously, there would be nothing happening in that regard, that industry. But then SAG put out their kind of guidelines for cosplayers, influencers, anyone who has a desire to, if you have ambitions to, you know, pursue a career or join those unions one day in the future, this could jeopardize that if you engage in this material right now. And even as a reactor, you know, I still don't know if I would have an answer necessarily if I wasn't pursuing a career in showbiz, if I would have made that same decision, because that was a huge talk about being dormant and not knowing what the frick to do on my channel. That was a pretty big blow when I discovered I shouldn't be and couldn't be if I still wanted to join SAG-AFTRA one day. I cannot be doing this right now. You know, but I still stuck by whether I would have made that same decision or not if I never wanted to be an actor or in this filmmaking industry in any point in the future. I still tried to remind myself, like, I get YouTube revenue off of watching and enjoying and talking about this content. How is that fair that I can be doing that, but the actors themselves, the talented people who made this happen, the ones who weren't being lazy and just sitting, you know, the ones who really brought this to life, I'm just sitting here watching it. You know, that's kind of what I clung to in order to ride that wave. But it certainly, you know, that was a pretty tough time because I had people suggesting, like, your channel's going to die. You know, this is not, don't do this. And it's like, I really didn't have a choice. That's kind of what made it easier for me. There wasn't that kind of gray area of like, well, should I? It kind of was just a concrete, can't do it if you ever want to join SAG-AFTRA, which is totally understandable and totally, you know, I was fine with those circumstances, albeit having been news to me at the time for my YouTube channel. So I think, you know, it was an interesting time, but I was very relieved to see that those reactions still performed okay way after the fact. It had been, I think it was a few months after Ahsoka had wrapped that I was finally able to, the show had wrapped, the final episode had aired, that I was able to finally release those. But it was a big relief to see, like, okay, the channel didn't die and people are still watching these, you know, retroactively, you know, like in hindsight, because that show was so good in my opinion and people were still going to be enjoying that fresh content. But yeah, that was an interesting time. An interesting time on the channel for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, just having that sort of performance background for yourself, you just had your short film come out, Another Man's Trash, on Amazon Prime. People can go watch that now. If you ever managed to have an extensive role come to fruition that required a lot of your time, do you think you'd find a way to balance that with the channel still, or do you think you might sort of prioritize that over the channel to sort of make sure that's, you know, in the focus and keep the channel on the side at the time?
Great question that I don't even know if I fully thought about. Also, thank you for the plug for Another Man's Trash. Yes. I think I have fantasized as I'm knocking over my Funko Pops about a future in which if I were to book a series regular, perhaps, or, life-altering dream would be, of course, I've said this on the channel and I'll say it again. I would love to be in Star Wars one day. That is the ultimate ambition and goal. But of course, I am realistic and I recognize that this is a difficult industry. So I've found solace in the fact that I'm still extremely happy with making the content about it and still sharing in the joy and feeling like you're a part of it in a different sense with the community as a reactor. That said, though, I've definitely toyed with the idea of perhaps making that more of a focus on the channel. If something like that were to ever happen, trying to, as easily as I could without breaking NDAs, like towing that line of being an actor who has a YouTube channel, who started out as a nerd or a fan, and then, their dream came true, and now they can integrate that and make that the kind of focus of their content. I think that would be something that fans would love to see, and I think that's why actors who do have YouTube channels, it's kind of, I don't know, it breaks down a barrier in a way, because you then get to see what's their real life, what's that experience, and it feels more accessible. So if I were to be able to make as much content as you possibly can about this is my day in the life on set, or, here's me then filming my reaction to an episode that I was in, and I get to share my commentary after the fact of behind the scenes filming. That would, of course, be a huge dream. I feel like, in a fun niche to share and make some content about. Maybe one day.
Yeah, that'd be great, and there's precedent for that. Brie Larson had a YouTube channel for a couple of years during the pandemic.
Right. Yes.
Michaela Joel Murphy, who is the voice of Toph on Avatar, just did a rewatch of the whole Avatar series leading up to the live action show. There's definitely an element of it that's, like you said, it's being broken down now. We're seeing more actors have, podcasts to reflect upon their time on their shows, stuff like that. So the territory is definitely there to venture in. So it'd be great if you could, manage to cross that threshold once again.
Yeah, no, that's so true. We've watched her videos. Toph, she's awesome. That was so much fun to pregame the Avatar series by watching her stuff.
Yeah. And so I know I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up one of the more prevalent issues in the Star Wars space at the time, specifically right now in the past month or so, which is the sort of conversation about unhealthy criticism and toxicity that goes on in the space. And I think anyone who does content creation sort of on camera, has an on-camera presence, is aware of that, regardless of whether you want to or not. It's been almost a decade since Force Awakens came out, and that's sort of what kicked off, this sort of tumultuous time of people having very sort of hard opinions about what Star Wars they want, what they want it to go to. And it's been an open dialogue in the sense of people are very aware of what people are feeling. As we've discussed about authenticity and having a natural sort of engagement with the material, my friend Kyle Katarn that we mentioned, he has a very similar disposition where he has openly admitted that Star Wars is just an easy mark for him. It just naturally makes him very happy. He doesn't struggle to stay engaged, happy, to talk about it in a very positive manner. And there's nothing really wrong with that. But there are people who see the enjoyment of the sort of new Disney Star Wars era as disingenuous. How have you been able to navigate the space with that genuine enthusiasm, but also being aware of the sort of larger conversation going on at the moment with, sort of the toxic fandom?
Yeah. Now is a very prevalent time for that. And I've felt it more than ever, because it wasn't until, I would get comments here and there in regards to if I ever spoke about the sequels, if you genuinely liked this, I actually have a Last Jedi poster back there that, as soon as we hung that up, immediately people sniped it out. And it's not even that noticeable. It's in the background of our videos, but people would immediately be like, Last Jedi poster, fake, don't trust this person. But that was very far and few between versus now, and I've seen other creators facing the same accusations of this kind of suggestion that there's no way possible that you could physically be a real life Disney Star Wars fan. There's no way that that's genuine if you're not getting paid by you know who, which I think it's hilarious that that's the notion happening right now, because I think Kyle actually made this point recently on X that it's not necessarily that lucrative to be, you know, because of such accusations like that. People think that you're a shill. And I think that word has strayed so far from its original intent, because now everyone and anyone who likes Disney Star Wars is a shill and is getting paid to be one. But, you know, it's definitely, I think I had to finally really just draw a mental barrier, a boundary again for myself, because now more than ever, I've been having to dodge and block and, you know, read those types of comments and accusations and judgments. But I try to stay grounded in knowing that none of these people know me. They might not even be real humans. They're just bots on the internet. Like, you know, really trying, because being a reactionary YouTuber, I do feel like you want to defend yourself. And anytime I ever do respond to a negative comment like that, I admit this is a weakness of mine, and it's something I've tried to navigate. You know, where do you toe the line between your own sanity and responding to try to start a dialogue with some of these people, to not feel like you're just sitting by ignoring other people's opinions. Because I do think it's genuinely important to start dialogue and ask someone, why do you genuinely dislike this, or why do you feel this way? But whenever it's a comment like that triggers me and I go to respond to it, sometimes my pettiness comes through and I'll say something, but I immediately delete it because it never makes me feel better. And it's like I don't have to prove myself to these people, these strangers on the internet. You know, I always call them my OGs. They know they've got my back. You know, I think now more than ever I've had to really navigate having their back as well, because they will, and keeping my comment section a safe place for engagement and them to share their opinions, because then, you know, they will be getting attacked by these, you know, toxic people. Or again, I don't like to use the word troll, but that's what you have to justify it sometimes in your mind. Like, this might not even be a real person. It's just a bot. It's just a bot on the internet. But you know, that's not to dehumanize, by the way, anyone who has those beliefs. I hope that's not what it's coming across as, but that's what you have to just remind yourself at times. Like, this person has no merit in my real life. I don't have to justify or explain myself to anybody. And I know I'm also not rolling in the dough from anyone paying me to feel this way. So I'm self-assured in my truth. But it's definitely been, I've found it especially tough at this time. I think for me, it's where do you engage, the choice between when and where do you engage to try to breach some healthy, you know, conversation, and when do you have to just draw that boundary for yourself and your own sake, and just accept, like, nothing good might come of this, so I can't even begin to entertain it, and I just have to press block and move on, which I admittedly used to hate having to do, the block button. I thought it was a sign of weakness for a very long time, but I've been abusing that thing more than ever recently. So I've since learned that you have to just draw that line for yourself, wherever it may be, whatever you can handle and tolerate, whatever keeps you grounded in spite of all of that. And I also, you know, you made a good point about where do you draw the separation between this being your passion, your hobby, and part of a real core part of your life. And I always, you know, I do feel that way in regards now. Like, Star Wars is a core part of my life, and it's, you know, what I do for YouTube and whatnot. So much of my daily life is centered around this franchise, more than I ever thought it would be. But, you know, I have to constantly remind myself, in spite of that, this is a fictional universe, and I should never let it dictate, you know, how I treat others in the real tangible world. And that said too, you know, like what Kyle said, I feel exactly the same. I always try to remind myself Disney could shut down at any moment and say, we're not doing Disney Plus anymore, the app, and everything on it is going to be sent off into the ether, and you'll never be able to access this content again. Like, I'm not saying that would ever happen, but it could, at any moment, they could say, we're not making any more Star Wars content for the next 10 years. And it's like, what then? What am I going to do with my life then? You know? So I just appreciate what we have now. And I just feel bad for those who can't, I don't know, relish in that in the same way. Just I'm grateful for content, however I feel about it. My husband and I always say at the end, if it's Star Wars, we're gonna watch it no matter what. We'll be there. So
Yeah, it resonates very well with I think what Leslie Hill had said about Star Wars. When people ask her what her favorite Star Wars movie is, she says there is no Star Wars favorite movie. There's just Star Wars to her. And like that's sort of the vibe I think I get from you and others. And I think that's, you know, a nice way to go about it, specifically when things are so fractured in a way, not just in the fandom, like as you said, in the sort of design of the franchise itself. Disney Plus, you know, as a byproduct of the streaming wars, has, you know, shelved some titles that they had previously, you know, had accessible. Now you can't find them anywhere. So I think there is a genuine, you know, concern that maybe someday it might go away, you know, because the streaming idea didn't work out, you know, culturally. You know, the same way we haven't had a Star Wars movie, you know, in several years now because of, you know, the decisions made in that trajectory. So it's definitely a thing that I think people can embrace, like you said, to just be grateful for having it at the moment. And, you know, if and when it goes away, then it's going to be the real dark days of, you know, going back to the era after the prequels between Clone Wars and stuff like that, just having nothing really much to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of ties into my last question here, or my round of questions, which is what has been the most consistent obstacle for you in your time with the channel?
Ooh. What has been? I think for me, I guess the biggest, most prevalent one is the acceptance of, yes, I am a YouTuber, embracing that, not shying away from that, and striking that balance between, you know, because as I had said for a long time, I thought this was just a hobby. It was just a side thing, a little recreational. And it wasn't until honestly this year, you know, especially coming off of last year where my channel went dormant because of the strikes and whatnot, and I wasn't making any content. You know, this year, maybe that was a catalyst for me to come into it and turn a new leaf and be like, I can really, whatever I put into this, I will be able to get out of it. You know, that's the beauty of YouTube. There is no cap, as my husband always says. And, you know, I tell him, I envy your career. You have stability. Your job might not shut down tomorrow. That's, you know, that's something about YouTube. It's like, you know, you say to people, that's what you do. And it's like, all right, now get a real job. It's still that internal, and I have that internalized stigma as well. And that fear that at any moment, you know, you work so hard to build your platform and your audience, and you make all these great connections and develop a community, and then at any moment YouTube could shut down. Same, maybe I sound like such a cynic for suggesting like, oh, Disney Plus could shut down, YouTube could shut down, but it's something I grapple with, you know. And so for me, the biggest challenge I think has been fully accepting, going full pedal to the metal and embracing this and finding the time to dedicate to it, especially when, you know, if you do want to make this work as a career, which I'm still not even fully doing just yet, it is such a time investment, you know, as an editor, like it is so much time for such little payoff sometimes, especially on a corner of the internet. You know, I would venture to say Star Wars YouTube, like Kyle said, isn't necessarily that lucrative at this point when the toxicity seems to be more prevalent than ever, and that's what people are seeking out, understandably, to vent. Because I understand a lot of people aren't happy right now and need a place to feel relatable in that regard, to express that amongst others who can share in that. So maybe this does come from an envious place, but on Star Wars YouTube especially, it's been particularly hard to pour so much time into content that you feel good about and you're passionate and you're happy and you're enjoying it, and to see it not perform as well as, right, you know it. We don't need to say it, but that's been probably the biggest struggle, finding the will to keep going and the motivation to keep just trugging along, positively leaning into what you love, even if the return isn't there. And also, I think actually that's maybe it boils down to that being the biggest challenge of wanting to stay genuine and not being driven by whatever you see on the little revenue, tab on your YouTube Studio app. It can be definitely difficult once you see that number start to go up, like, dang, but you also wanting to have that self-awareness and staying true to who you are and not let that drive you, I think is something that I think I always am trying to balance, having that same energy that I did when I only had 10K subscribers and wasn't even monetized, not being driven by that, not having that delegate my content or my essence and energy that I bring to the channel. But yeah, trying to find that balance of dedicating as much time as I want to the channel, even if that return isn't there necessarily. I think
sense.
That's probably the ongoing struggle, but I guess that's how you know your heart's in it, if you're still going.
yeah That's a big indicator for sure. I guess that ties into the next question, which is, how do you feel you've personally grown with your time with the channel?
Ooh, maybe a thicker skin. That's one thing I will always be grateful for YouTube, when you subject yourself publicly for people like Howard Stern to find you. You welcome feedback from the public and total strangers, and open yourself up and get vulnerable in that regard, especially being a YouTuber and especially being someone who cries as easily as I do. You welcome yourself to that criticism from people who don't know you and have never met you. As well as being a female Star Wars fan, that's a whole other area of people just reject and deny your knowledge or true love for that franchise, because there are still people who don't think women can be Star Wars fans. Right. There's no way. So in that regard, I think that's been one thing I'll always be grateful for, because sometimes I do get a quick jolt of existentialism and think, what am I doing? Why am I subjecting myself to all of these people in the world? Which might sound silly coming from somebody who wants to be an actor, but I think it's not something you consider until you're exposed to it, like feedback from anyone and everyone who comes across you, who doesn't know you, who's a stranger to you. But I'm grateful to have a family who can laugh at, the hate comments with me. My husband can laugh at them with me, and my OGs, a great community there. So I think in that regard, I used to not, though. I hate comments and stuff like that used to disturb me so much. And really, I would do all this self, reflection and whatnot. I gave so much weight to their words, and I no longer do that. And I feel like that has been just so helpful in allowing me to just feel comfortable in my own skin as myself, and at the end of the day, not be a closeted Star Wars nerd in online or in my real life. So I think that's one thing that I'll always be grateful for, the transformation of internalizing those types of comments and feedback, and then being able to go and just laugh at it at your own expense and not take it so seriously.
Yeah, that's a great, it's a great point of growth to have within yourself. The final question is, beyond any monetary or financial value, what is the most rewarding aspect of the channel for you?
Oh, just being able to talk Star Wars. It's so, and also I think also being YouTubers or editors, you work from home, you're so secluded and isolated by yourself all day long, just feeling like you're talking into the void or the ether sometimes. But then it's getting that connection with your community and being able to have people to talk about Star Wars with, especially if you might not have other fans in your real life who are as passionate as you are. For me and Tom, my husband, we don't necessarily really have anyone beyond our siblings in our real lives that we could fangirl about this with and, gush about it with, anyone else as much as we can with our community on our channel. So honestly, even if YouTube were to shut down revenue tomorrow and, I never made another penny or cent off of talking about Star Wars, I would still probably keep this going, because it's just become part of my routine and the way that I enjoy and dissect and digest the new content, to just talk about it with everybody on my community and sharing that and reassure each other's passions. So that would definitely be, that's probably just the biggest, it's certainly nice to be able to see like, oh, you get revenue from just talking about something you love in your life. Like, who gets to say that? But that's still one of the biggest joys of it, revenue attached or not, being able to just talk about it with other people who will listen and relate and appreciate it and reassure you, especially in this very tumultuous fandom where you need to gravitate towards people who share, your same stance or whatnot, whoever helps you keep going to push through it and whatnot. So that's probably the best part of it, probably.
Yeah. No, that's definitely part of it. Like the community is such an important aspect of like why we do this. I would say being able to, like you said, to share the interests of people that you otherwise can't find in your normal everyday life. It's the best part of the internet that is withheld in the reaction space. And that's why I love it so much.
Yeah, totally.
I do have our final questionnaire, just 10 questions down the line for you that we have. It could be Star Wars related or not, your answers. So the first question is, what is your favorite TV show of all time?
Oh, shoot. Of all time. Oh. All right. This is always subject to change. It always changes, but right now I have to say, I can't believe I'm saying this. Well, oh shoot. All right. This might not be true or reflective at all, but the first thing that's coming to mind is Yellow Jackets.
Oh, nice.
I think it's a Showtime series.
Yeah.
It was the first one that came to my mind, so clearly I love that show more than I can explain why. But
yeah. I really like that show. Yeah, me and my partner are very big fans. My girlfriend, she went out and had drinks with the creator.
No way.
After the first season came out, because she was able to spot that the character Misty is inspired by a movie called Welcome to the Dollhouse, and she was able to. She grew up watching that movie. She's like, I know exactly what that character's from. She messaged her, and she was like, "You're right. That's where that character is based off of." So they went out, had drinks with. Heather Matarazzo, who was in Welcome to the Dollhouse, and so yeah, it was a whole thing. She's very proud of that.
Oh my gosh, that is so freaking cool! I'm so glad you know the show and are clearly like buddies with the showrunners. Like, that's because whenever I tell people about that show, I think it's still fledgling. A lot of people don't know about it yet.
Yeah.
And it's like this is
still
the
hidden gem.
Ever.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's gonna grow. I think the word of mouth is spreading. Oh my gosh! Thank goodness you were familiar with it, so I don't sound absolutely wild for that
absolutely.
being my favorite.
Second question is, what is your favorite film of all time?
Oh, my instinct. This is gonna sound so awful. For someone who's aspiring to be like in the film industry, my instinct is to say Ratatouille. My family is going to absolutely roast me for that.
That's perfectly
that
fine
is
answer.
Literally one of my favorite movies. But if I had to get serious, one of my actual true favorite films is it's called Across the Universe. I should know the name of the director right now, but it's like that Beatles musical movie. It's perfection in my mind. It will be my favorite forever and always, probably.
Yeah. I remember I saw that in theaters when it came out. Yeah, that's a really fun movie.
Yes. To see it in theaters, oh my God, I'm jealous. That's got to be so cool.
Next question is, what stresses you out?
Ooh, stresses me out. Watching The Bear, that television show, as of late, has got to be watching that. I guess another thing would be, I don't know, living in Los Angeles and the population and existentialism sometimes gets to me. So
that's fair. Yeah, my partner again is right there with you with The Bear. I told her season 3 is out now. She's like, we can just not watch it if you want it. It's not having me stress out about it. Yeah.
Literally, my heart rate. I forgot how much that show gets me going. I just started watching season 3 and I was like, why do I do this? Why do I keep coming back?
Right. Well, the opposite end of that is what helps you relax?
ASMR. I love ASMR, which that I'm still closeted about, but not anymore. I'll own it. Definitely, I love to watch ASMR, which I know that has its whole own arena of taboos surrounding it, but I was very, it's funny, I used to watch that just when I first discovered it and how, relaxing it can be and how much it helped me, when I was in high school and college, the points in my life when I freaking needed ASMR, I was most stressed. now I'm outing him, my younger brother. I heard him listening to ASMR one day, and I was like, "You watch ASMR?" And he was like, "You watch ASMR?" And we like connected about it, and we were like, "All right, we're not weird, we're normal." But no,
Yeah.
I'll admit that everybody should be watching. I made ASMR videos on my channel. People know that I like that stuff. So
Yeah.
yes, full blown.
Very therapeutic. Yeah.
Yes.
What is a hobby or passion outside of TV and film that you have?
Painting and drawing, visual arts, fine arts, which is actually what I went to school for. So that's what, and it's been fun to integrate, my fandom into that
Yeah.
and make some like fan art and stuff, which I never thought I would really do. But that's been a fun way as well to explore
Right.
the fine art side of being a fan.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen some of the art you've had for Star Wars, stuff like that. It's really great.
Thank you.
What fictional character do you relate to or just care deeply about?
Wow, care deeply about. I'm gonna say Padme Amidala. She will always be an OG for me.
Yeah.
Protect her at all costs. Someone I would love to see come back to Star Wars, but yeah, she will always just be a character. Maybe it's because I was watching, the prequels during my formative years. I was a child prequel baby, so her character has just always resonated with me. Ride or die for life.
Yeah, my friend named Snow, who recently got into Star Wars this past year and a half or so, felt the same way. Padme's her number one, her number one
Yes.
girl from that. What is your guilty pleasure show or film?
Oh shoot, I should have saved Yellow Jackets for that. I should have saved Ratatouille for that. Oh, guilty pleasure show or film. Oh, it's probably, I should know the director for this as well. It's the Anna Karenina film with Keira Knightley,
Oh,
who is
yeah.
another one of my idols in life. Oh, I freaking love that movie. That's probably a guilty pleasure one, because I don't know like anybody else in my life who's really watched that necessarily.
Yeah.
But it's one of my favorite freaking films. But I just keep
Yeah.
that closeted. But
It's
I'd
great.
have to
That's a
say
great
that.
film. Yeah, it's great in the catalog of Keira Knightley period piece movies.
Yes, add it to the list.
Yeah. What show or film gave you your favorite reaction experience with the channel?
Probably Kenobi. I think it's particularly that trailer, that infamous the Kenobi trailer, but I think just that show in general. I will always cherish those like reactions, but the energy and the fandom at the time, and the feeding off of that in the reactions, and just everybody collectively living our best lives. Probably
Yeah.
that's been my favorite. I don't know if anything's topped that just yet. Just the emotions, but not even believing that I was alive at the same time that this was even happening, that this was
Yeah.
happening in Star Wars right now. I'll never get over that.
Yeah, it's a great one. What show or film do you wish you could erase from your memory and react to again for the first time on camera?
Oh, Interstellar, probably.
That's a good
That
one.
film, and my husband and I, whenever we scroll through other reaction videos, that's always like a super popular one because it's just so mind bending. So I would love to delete that and rewatch it again.
Yeah, yeah, that'd definitely make a good one. Yeah, have you seen Arrival?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, that always goes hand in hand when people say like Interstellar, you should see Arrival. So I just wanted to double check, make sure. Yeah.
No, that was a good one as well. I should have reacted to that. Why did I? This is my mindset now. My husband's like, never go watch anything in theaters ever again. You need to just react to that.
Yeah, yeah. And final question here is: what advice would you give to your past self if you can go back in time when you first started the channel?
Ooh. Oh, what would I? Fabulous questions, by the way. Thank you for all of this.
Thank you.
Very introspective. This is great. I think I would say I'd probably tell her, don't ever respond to hate comments, because I opened Pandora's box the first time I did. Like, because you do get a little rush. Is your instincts to want to defend yourself or defend the content or just respond something sassy, because I'm very much a believer in treat everybody how you would like to be, you know, regardless of how they treat you. But when it comes to the YouTube comments, man, I'm like, if somebody's sassy to me, I can be sassy right back. It's my channel. And unfortunately, you know, that's the mindset I had when I first got started, and I was still young and in college, so I wasn't as wise and mature, and I internalized and put more credence to that, all those types of comments. So I'd probably tell her, don't engage, because once you start, you kind of will develop a habit of it, like a hack that I'll, as I mentioned, you know, I respond to some of these and then I just delete both comments in general just to give myself that satisfaction and then take it down. But that's not good for anybody. That's not helping me, and it's only a temporary fix. So that's probably what I would tell her. Just don't engage. Just draw that boundary for yourself, and don't feel like you have to engage, because then you'll open Pandora's box, which I'm still trying to close several years later. So
yeah, it can it can be tempting to want to do that. So yeah, just gotta take it one day at a time.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Kat, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure to talk to you and just hear all about your insight into this whole space. It's been very informative. I appreciate it. Thank
you so much for bearing through all of my long-winded answers. You're such a phenomenal listener, and thank you for, you know more about my channel than I do. Like, this was so much fun to just like reflect and review on the journey as a YouTuber. So thank you so much. And again, for not forsaking me after it took me forever to get back to you.
Don't worry. Like I said, there's plenty of Star Wars to talk about, so we'll definitely have you on again one of these days.
I would be honored, and I will actually answer my messages this time. Thank you.
Of course. Where can we find you on YouTube or social media or otherwise?
YouTube is just my name, Catherine LaSalle, as displayed here. And all of my other socials are typically linked in my YouTube description. Instagram is at CatLaSalle2. I believe Twitter is a similar variation to that, or X, I should say. Yeah. I should know all these off the top of my head, but self-promotion is not one of my strengths, so you can find them in my description, or just CatherineLaSalle.com. I think a lot of my links are on there as well, and I often forget that I have a website, so yes. Right. That's where also I sell my artwork, if anyone is interested, so...
Great. You can find me at Chronic across social media. You can find us at Passionfruit for Us on social media as well. You can find us at our Patreon and Discord in the links below, and we'll catch everyone on the next episode.